What you're hearing now are the Vesper bells of the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome. The year is 897 and the sun is setting behind the hills. Inside the basilica, a young deacon approaches the Pope. He is there to dress him with the papal garments. The pontiff stays still, seated on a chair, while the pallid priest comes closer. His hands tremble, his whole body shakes while he draws closer to the hair of Peter. He isn't new to this, he has already helped the old pontiff to wear his robe, to put on his shoes, his soft leather gloves. So why is he so upset? Why his fingers cannot grasp the buttons of the cassock? He holds his breath while looking away with horror. The fact is, you see, the Pope is helping, is dead. Long dead. He left this world a few months earlier, during one of the most turbulent periods the city of Rome has ever experienced. And now he is back again. At least his corpse is back, exhumed by the order of another pope, who wants to literally drag him through the courts. Pope versus Pope, the living against the dead. There is no precedent, and luckily no subsequent case to a trial like this in the history of the Catholic Church. But how this happened? And most importantly, why? Is this a sick joke? Perhaps it's work of a madman? Well, the story is more complex than that. But do not worry, this often happens when you unravel old facts. We'll get to the bottom of this. Please bear with me. This story comes from Ars Dicendi, and today we are dealing with Italian culture. We are not accustomed to what happened during that chilly evening of 897. Our current mindset cannot accept the very idea behind what is called the Cadaver Synod. No one could really think of putting a dead person on trial. The reason is evident, that person is already beyond human justice. In jurisprudence there is something called natural person, that is a living human being, let's stress living here, with certain rights and responsibilities under the law. Once someone's dead, it's no more a natural person and therefore cannot be charged with anything. But what probably shocks us the most is the subject and the promoter of this trial. They were both popes. In modern times, the papacy is considered one of the most revered institutions. Popes, mostly seen as benign grandfathers, embodies the voice of compassion, but clearly that wasn't always the case. Saeculum Obscurum, the Dark Age, that's the name historians gave to the period in the history of the papacy that spans the 10th century. To be conservative, it was a wild age. Pope succeeded Pope with disturbing rapidity. 24 popes in 94 years. 1/3 of these 24 popes were assassinated. 5 were just murdered or imprisoned and then killed. 1 died by the consequences of severe torture, while another was killed by his own escort. They tried to poison him, but as the venom wasn't acted quickly enough, they opted for smashing his head with a hammer. There's plenty of morbid stories that reflect the decadence of those years, but we aren't going to deal with them right now. Now it's time to come back to St. John Lateran and focus on the Cadaver Trial, the event that paved the way for the Dark Age of Papacy. If you're looking for a more immersive experience, check out our site, italianculturepodcast.com. You'll find plenty of photos and paintings that may help you visualize the places, the actions and the actors in this trial. We left the young deacon dressing the Pope's corpse, just before the trial. The dead pontiff was once known as Formosus, which means good-looking in Latin. He is not good-looking anymore, rest assured, but besides the state of his body, his whole figure still instills reverence in those who look at him. He wears the regalia he once wore when he was alive, like the heavy metal crown that makes his head tilt on a side. Around him, a full team of bishops play as witnesses and co-accusers. Spread in two long wings, they approach the throne, while the trembling deacon tries to arrange Formosus' stiff body into the most uncomfortable seat. Stephen V leads the prosecution. He is the incumbent pope, the most energetic promoter of this trial. He looks splendid and terrible in his luxurious attires, while he raises the voice, numbering a long list of sins and felonies Formosus allegedly committed during his tenure. We don't know exactly which words Stephen pronounced in his closing argument, but historians were able to reconstruct the gist of it.
I think it seems clear that the main accusation was that the Pope had defied one of the canons of the Council of Nicaea that forbade the translation of a bishop from one see to another.
This is Roger Collins, Honorary Fellow in the School of History, Classics and Archaeology in the University of Edinburgh. He's an expert in papal history and early Middle Ages.
So once you were made bishop of whatever the see, there was no way in principle in which you could be transferred to another. Nor could you, as it were, be elevated in status. If you were bishop of some small town, you could not be moved on to become archbishop somewhere else, let alone to be made Bishop of Rome or Pope. Formosus had been appointed as Bishop of Porto, and when he was elected Pope, therefore he was breaking this canon of Nicaea by being translated from his original see to that of Rome itself.
The Lateran Basilica is now silent. The prosecution waits for a response, for a defense that can never come. But it comes. In the end it comes, as a feeble voice from behind the throne where Formosus sits. It's the young deacon who musters all his courage and speaks, or at least tries to speak in defense of the dead pope. But despite his efforts, there is only one possible outcome. The trial is a farce, and as a cruel farce it ends. Stephen announces the punishment. Formosus, his deeds, his memory will be forever damned. His regalia are torn off and shredded in pieces, while the guards cut off his fingers of consecration. Then a mob drags his body along the streets of Rome until they reach the Tiber. The river finally embraces Formosus, while the people of Rome came back to their homes in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica. What do we see today when we look at the papacy? We notice the pomp, the lux, but mostly we recognize that some sort of aura permeates the figure of the pontiff. It teaches what's good and what's evil according to the Catholic Catechism. It explains why good Christians should behave in a certain manner, refraining from some activities while indulging into others. That's how the Pope exercises what is called spiritual power. But there is also another kind of power that popes held for centuries, that is the temporal power, their power over the reign of man. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the popes claimed the role of pontiff once owned by the emperors. They became leaders of the church and princes of Rome, where the seat of St. Peter survived, while kingdoms rose and fell. So during the Middle Ages, popes were like kings. They ruled over their own state, the Pontiff state that occupied a large part of central Italy. In addition to that, they were recognized as the only earthly power that could bestow the crown of emperor or king. As such, they were involved in complex political schemes, trying to defend their power, both spiritual and temporal. Roger Collins.
In the 8th and 9th centuries, the acquiring and preservation of a territorial lordship, the papal state, becomes vital to papal interests. Because if they've got the land, if they've got the resources, then they've got something, as it were, that will keep the rest of the secular world at bay, that there will not ultimately be that kind of secular dominance.
The Pope had to play his role of first among equals in an harsh environment, trying to keep his allies close, but not too close. The last protector of the papacy had been Charlemagne, ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, herald of Christianity and leader of the Christendom. His rule ended in the winter of 814. Again, Roger Collins.
At the time of the trial of Formosus, Western Europe was suffering from a number of external and internal problems. Externally, in the sense of attacks, raids that were intensifying, both from the north, from Scandinavia, and at the same time in the south, Arab raids from North Africa and Sicily. The Carolingian Empire was itself disintegrating, partly as a result of these external problems. The Carolingian rulers had to be many places at the same time. Their own leading men were unwilling to go on campaigns when they had their own local defense problems to deal with, and for a number of other reasons, including conflicts between the rival members of the Carolingian family.